The closer we get to spring, the less I feel like sitting inside and cooking, but alas, we do have to eat. So I'm sharing with you 3 30-minute meals to make this week so you can get out of the kitchen and get outside. On the menu, we have a homemade cheeseburger helper, a creamy lemon chicken, and a cheddar, broccoli, and potato soup. And these are all one-pot meals, which makes them even better. One of my top tips for making quick meals is to pick a recipe that requires very little chopping, because for me, sometimes the chopping is what takes up most of the time. This homemade cheeseburger helper recipe, which you can find on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com, requires only a half an onion chopped. The rest of the ingredients go right into the pot as is. You'll also need 1 pound of ground beef, 1 garlic clove minced, 1 can of diced tomatoes. I like to use a pint of home canned tomatoes, but you could use a 4.5 ounce can of store-bought diced tomatoes, a tablespoon of Italian seasoning, 3 cups of chicken or beef broth, 2 cups of uncooked macaroni noodles, and 2 cups of shredded cheddar cheese, and of course, as always, salt and pepper to taste. I warmed up some butter in my Dutch oven and I threw in the diced onion, and while that is cooking, I'm getting myself organized here. So I like to keep 2 bowls on hand while I'm cooking. One for compost, so if you compost, you can put all your scraps in there, and then one for trash, and I just throw all my garbage in there and take everything to the trash can at one time. I know that sounds a little trivial, but it really does save a lot of time. Once the onions are tender crisp, I'm just adding in the ground beef right into the pot and breaking it up with a wood spoon. And then I am seasoning this with salt and pepper to taste. So now I just let the onions and the beef cook together until the beef is ready. Now you can drain the fat from the beef if you want to. This isn't particularly fatty beef, and I tend to not drain the fat. Whenever I use meat, I like to use as much of the animal as I can just to be respectful for its sacrifice. But if you want to drain the fat, you can. Another tip I have for making 30-minute meals or quick meals is to not stop moving. And I don't mean this in a way of like, you're not doing enough, keep doing more, because that's definitely not true. I just mean while the onions and beef are cooking, get the broth ready or measure out the noodles or something. So that way you can just keep this going like a well-oiled machine until you are finished cooking. Once the beef is cooked through, I'm adding in a can of diced tomatoes, 3 cups of chicken broth, and Italian seasoning, and bringing that to a boil. And in the meantime, I am shredding some cheddar cheese. I found some frozen shredded cheddar in the freezer that I'm using, and then I'm just shredding the rest for the recipe. And just as a side note, I did not know until I was editing this video how much cheese I used in this video. If you ever want to know how much cheese you use or how dirty your house is or what you really look like, start a YouTube channel. But anyway, so I'm shredding the cheese and I'm getting the noodles in the boiling broth. You can use whatever dry noodles you have on hand. The recipe on my blog calls for macaroni noodles, but I actually didn't have any that day, so I just used whatever I had in my pantry. I can't even remember what it is now. And it works totally fine. Do be mindful though that if the noodle tends to be a little heartier, you might have to add a little more liquid to it. When the noodles have cooked, just add the shredded cheddar cheese, stir it in, and then you just enjoy it. This took me 30 minutes, and that was with moving my camera around my house too. So you could probably have this done in 25 minutes or less because it's that simple. This also freezes really well. If you wanted to freeze this, I would just recommend undercooking the pasta and freezing it. And then that way, when you reheat it, you won't have mushy pasta. You can just add a little bit of liquid as needed to reheat it. And then you have yourself not just a 30-minute meal, but a 30-minute freezer meal too, which is like even better, right? Okay, next up is creamy lemon chicken, and this is made in one skillet in about 25 minutes. For this, you will need a half a cup of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of neutral oil, a pound of chicken, whether it's chicken thighs, thin-cut chicken breast, chicken tenders. Just make sure they're either sliced or pounded thinly. 2 to 3 cloves of garlic, 6 ounces of white wine, and a little hack for that is a split of wine is 6 ounces. So if you don't have a bottle or if you don't drink wine, you can just get a little split and that will do the job for you. 1 cup of heavy cream, 1 lemon zested and juice, a half cup of grated Parmesan, 5 ounces of baby spinach, and lemon slices for garnish if you're feeling fancy, but you of course don't have to have lemon slices, but either way, you are definitely fancy with or without the garnish. So I'm very simply just dredging these chicken thighs in some seasoned flour. And I've made a lot of fried chicken on YouTube lately. I don't know why, I guess I'm just in the fried chicken mood, but this is actually a pan-seared chicken, so it's not quite the same as what I have shared recently. So just dredge your chicken in flour and then preheat oil in a cast iron pan or a skillet. And you just need about 2 tablespoons for pan searing this. When the oil is hot, add your chicken to this skillet, and I let it cook for about, I'd say 4 to 5 minutes on the first side. In the past, I have felt like a lot of recipes really downplay how long it takes to pan fry or to sear something, but I think the real issue was me, user error over here. I think the real problem was that my skillet wasn't hot enough. So make sure your skillet's actually hot enough so you can really get a golden brown sear on each side within about 4 to 5 minutes. And then when you're ready on the first side, just flip them over and do the same. It took me about 10 minutes total to cook the chicken, and I'm using a digital thermometer just to make sure it hits 165. It is crucial that your chicken is cooked through at this stage because you really can't cook it anymore after this or you'll ruin the whole dish. Then take the chicken out and set it aside. Now, I would recommend first deglazing your pan with white wine and then adding in your garlic. I did the opposite and I burned my garlic. So deglaze your pan with some of the white wine. That will help cool the pan off a little bit. Scrape off some of those brown bits for flavor, then saute your garlic, add in the rest of the wine, and add in the heavy cream. I've also made this before with half and half and it turned out just fine and was delicious, but it's like really good with heavy cream. Then I'm just quickly zesting a lemon right over the skillet. So I really like to use this zester because you can just hold it right over your skillet or your bowl, whatever you're doing, and it gets the lemon zest right in there. And then I'm also adding in some shaved Parmesan. You could also use regular shredded Parmesan. And I'm stirring it up just until everything is combined. And now I'm juicing the same lemon that I zested. And I'm juicing the entire lemon. It seems like a lot of lemon juice, but with the cream and the Parmesan, it really balances out just fine. So do juice your whole lemon. Then I'm adding in the spinach, and this is really crucial. Put the spinach in, turn the heat off, and stir it just until that spinach starts to wilt. Overcooked spinach is pretty gnarly, so you really want to make sure it's not overcooked. Once that spinach starts to wilt and is soft, return your pan-fried chicken back into the skillet, and you don't even need to turn the heat back on because the residual heat will keep cooking that spinach and keep the sauce warm. And then I like to add in a few slices of lemon just to make it look really beautiful, and then sprinkle it with a little bit more Parmesan. But that's really optional. If you're in a huge hurry, there's no need to garnish it with any more lemon or Parmesan. This is great with broccoli or leftover rice or orzo or even a piece of toasted sourdough for a well-rounded meal. Last up is a cheddar, broccoli, and potato soup. And you can actually make this in one of two ways. So it can be done in about 20 minutes or it can be done in about 30 minutes, depending on whether or not you want to blend it. Now, I know I said in the beginning of the video, one trick to quick cooking is to reduce how much you have to chop. This one does require you to chop carrots, onions, celery, and potatoes. But one thing you can do to speed that up is to chop extra earlier in the week, for example, if you're already making something with those ingredients and then you have them ready. The other thing is, because this soup can be blended, you can just do a rough chop, which takes almost no time. Outside of the chopped vegetables, you will also need chicken broth, milk, broccoli. I actually use frozen broccoli for this to save time, so that's a great hack too. Some shredded cheddar cheese. I told you there's a lot of cheese this week. And then also, of course, salt and pepper to taste. I'm just getting everything chopped and ready to go. So when there is a little bit more chopping, I like to do all the chopping at one time because otherwise I start to feel like a little frenetic running around the kitchen. So I'm getting the onions, carrots, and celery chopped and ready to go. I am holding the potatoes until just a little bit later though, because they turn black pretty quickly. They oxidize quickly. So I'm just holding on that for a minute. And then once everything is chopped, I'm just putting it right into my Dutch oven. You could use a stock pot if that's what you have, and sauteing everything until it is tender crisp. Sticking with recipes like this where it is totally mindless, I've talked about this before, where you just chop vegetables that you chopped 1,000 times, really does help make things go faster because you just don't have that much to think about. I've made this recipe 10,000 times. I eat soup all year long. It doesn't matter what the temperature is outside. I like to eat soup. So it's really important that you're just sticking with things that you know how to do because that does make it go really quickly. So a weeknight 30-minute meal is not a time to start something brand spanking new. Now I am just cutting the potatoes into bite-sized pieces. You can peel these if you want to. I know there's a lot of feelings about whether or not you should peel your potatoes. To save time, I am not peeling my potatoes this day, but you definitely could if you want to. Now I'm adding 3 cups of chicken broth and a cup of milk right into the Dutch oven with the cooked vegetables. Before I turn up the heat, I like to add the potatoes into the broth. I have found the potatoes cook better if you put them in the liquid and bring everything up to a boil together. In hindsight, I should have put all these potatoes in a bowl and carried them over at once. I know that sounds trivial, but running back and forth like this starts to make me feel stressed out when I'm cooking. So I would recommend trying to get everything to the stove at one time. And shocker, I'm shredding more cheese. I think I only use maybe like a cup and a half of cheese for this soup. You can use as much or as little as you want. Sometimes for veggie heavy things like this, I don't want to overdo the cheese too much. So once the potatoes are mostly cooked through where you can pierce them with a fork, it's time to add in the broccoli. So I usually make this with fresh broccoli, but I am using frozen broccoli this time and it worked out just as well. And honestly, it was significantly easier. So put the broccoli in, bring it to a simmer and cover it with the lid and let it cook until the broccoli is tender. You can 100% stop this recipe right here, add your cheese, or don't even add cheese at all and enjoy it. I prefer to have this blended. So first I am blending it until it is to my desired thickness. I did have to add a little more milk to this. I would say broth would probably work better to thin it, but I did not feel like opening another box of broth just to thin this soup. So I used milk to thin it and then I blended it up to my desired consistency. Once it is completely blended to your liking, then turn off the heat, add in the cheese, stir, and enjoy. For me, this is a full meal in itself. My husband often likes to have this as a side with, say, steak or a piece of chicken breast, something like that. But this also lasts us a few meals. So I make it in 30 minutes and then it lasts a couple of days for us.
That's good.
I love cooking. I love cooking for my family. I love being in the kitchen and learning new things. But when the days are getting longer and the days are getting warmer, I do not feel like being in the kitchen as much. So 30-minute meals like this, one pot family meals, they are my go-to as we are heading into spring. I hope these meals have inspired you to think of ways to speed up the dinner process so you can get out of the kitchen and outside. You can get all of these recipes and more over on my blog at moonandmagnolia.com. I'll leave those links in the description box below. Thank you so much for tuning into Moon and Magnolia's YouTube channel where we elevate the everyday from scratch and at home, and I'll see you again next time.